Zainab. Thank you, Eleanor. We'll speak about the future of the Nahrein network after we've spoken to our panelists. I just want to give sort of a background, a bit more information about the scholarships program. I know there will be lots of questions about the scholarships program. It's a 2-month program, as Elena has shown, and the scholars, the researchers choose the subject and they choose the university. And all expenses are paid, and more information can be found on our website. I'd like to start with, unfortunately, Dr. Mustafa cannot be with us today, but I'd like to start with Dr. Rozhen, and then, of course, we can speak to Ali Naji, Mohammed, and Dr. Professor Maher. And it's a question for everyone. How have the placements that you've had in the UK supported and strengthened your own intellectual, personal, and research development? We can start with Dr. Rozhen, who's our co-director of the Nahrein network, actually.
Thank you very much, Mehiyar. In terms of, because the video was featuring the THN project and some others as part of my co-director role, I would like to start off by naming and acknowledging the funders of the Visiting Scholarship, BISI, and the Nahrein Network, as well as my wonderful host at the University of Glasgow, Professor Dr. Maria Economo, who has done a tremendous job in supporting me and also connecting me to many opportunities, and which have led to many long-term academic collaboration and exchange. In that regard, it has been actually one of the best and richest learning experience for me personally, professionally, and scholarly. I would say sometimes I mention about this, it came actually as a booster shot for my post-PhD, because like in the spirit of COVID and boosting shots, it is because mostly it was like coming back from Canada after doing my research in an area that was rarely here in Kurdistan region and the rest of Iraq in digital cultural heritage. So getting too many questions about what does that have to do with my architecture background and how I am connecting this, and start with my plan and vision to open a research center in digital cultural heritage. It was really a very timely opportunity for me in that sense, because it reconnected me with tools, resources, and also people and learnings that was complementing what I learned from my PhD, and in fact extending it to that extent. So like I mentioned, it really opened many doors, and the project, actually all of the projects that we are doing now, we are either informed or inspired by that collaboration, because as part of that collaboration, which I forgot to mention, I was also connected to Emotive project team, which is also in itself was a great team and very supportive, because Dr. Maria Economo's research project was involved with them. So through here, I got connected to all these wonderful academics who were doing state-of-art research in the connection between digital technology, emotional storytelling, and cultural heritage. And as you see in the video, we will mention about the assessment of Nobody's Listening, the methodology, and also the collaborators were from Emotive project. So it came from that collaboration. And that methodology we use, actually, we're also informed and mostly informed and inspired by the Emotive tools and methodology. And other projects that are done that I didn't mention in the video are a multimedia guide for Slemani Museum, and then soon an AR augmented reality-based experience for the Slemani Museum. And in fact, Emotive, they have and continue to support us with their even tools and platform. So the Athena Research Center, based in Greece, which is one of the partners of the Emotive project, who I got to now through that visiting scholarship, are actually still helping us and providing us with their platform to develop these easily developed experiences for cultural heritage, for experiencing museum collection in Slemani Museum and soon others. And also with, like I mentioned about Nobody's Listening, and also Talk to Sarai, one of our upcoming mobile AR exhibition. It's also like the stories that we are using, the use of emotion in storytelling was predominantly informed and inspired by the involvement with Emotive project, and which is something I got to get involved through that scholarship. So, you know, I could stay for the rest of the session talking about the outcomes, actually, the many other outcomes of it, but I don't want to take more of your time on the panel. So
thank you, Rozhen. There's actually a question now I think you're best suited to answer. And it's a question about, I believe, about nobody's listening and your work and contribution to it. And the question really is about the valuable work you've been doing to raise awareness about genocide in Iraq in recent years, and how your work with Nobody's Listening has actually attempted to overcome some of the communal trauma experienced by the Yazidis of Iraq.
So actually, again, that Nobody's Listening was that project from Yazda and Surround Vision. They have developed it, but then together with Ryan D'Souza, we made a suggestion to IOM and USA to actually assess the impact of it, because that's when you can actually see the long-term use of this kind of project. What it does, it actually very eloquently, for lack of better word to put it now, but I mean very sensitively and also very deeply engage users of that exhibition, that virtual reality exhibition, with the Yazidi cause and their genocide cause. So the assessment that we took through the lens of emotive, basically we are trying to see whether emotional engagement with difficult heritage, which is normally are not, in fact, difficult heritage is rarely understood as a form of heritage here in Iraq. You know, and it's something I remember a while ago, it was a webinar from BISI that was talking about the importance of keeping difficult heritage. So, I mean, in that regard, it is important, but it is because people are so occupied with so pressing other things. Cultural heritage itself is seen as a luxury, and let alone difficult heritage. Yet it is such an important tool and engine for actually building peace and social cohesion. It's something I think our report and assessment is really helping with raising awareness about the impact of creating such experiences for other communities, for the Yazidi genocide cause, and also others.
Thank you, Rozhen. I'm very happy about the work that you're doing, and it's raising awareness, but also trying to build local capacity in general through the work that you're contributing to the Nahrein with. Dr. Ali Naji from University of Kufa, you are a scholar at University College London, and you are also a grant holder. You work on one of the research grants that we have. I would like to ask you about the contribution that this scholarship has made to you personally, and also in relation to the project that you're working on, which I believe is on the Ottoman history and in Najaf in particular.
Yes, thank you, Mehiyar, and thank you also the Nahrein Network and BISI for giving this opportunity to attend this curriculum and to talk about the scholarship visit. And also I should acknowledge my host there, Professor Edward Dennison from Bartlett School of Architecture. Yes, the idea started from a feeling, a painful feeling. Unfortunately, we are now a witnesses everyday deterioration of heritage in our cities. And start thinking, who are responsible of that? Always we said that the authorities are responsible of that. But I think there are another stakeholders, the local peoples and so on, who are also responsible of that. I will talk about my city, Najaf and Kufa. As you know that now they are merged in one large city. The problem is losing maybe every day, every month, every week, maybe a building or an old fabric texture in those cities. Some people didn't feel that those buildings, this texture is part of their cultural identity. From this point, I started to think in the intangible heritage. While we are having a holistic view for both types of heritage, tangible and intangible, to attract the awareness of the local people who are working in every day, but most of them inherited this work from their grandfathers and fathers and so on. And it is the majority, it is handicraft things. For this, I wrote to the Nahrein network a proposal about that, to visit London, to visit UK, and see what happened there. Is there any something like linking those things together? I can say there is a good impression, and at the same time there is a bad impression, because the problem of heritage, maybe it is not well understood by everyone in the world. Still, the globalization, the development projects, and so on, let me say that it's dominating the minds of people who are thinking always in the economy, but they did not now think in very important about the future of these cultures and the peacemaking, if we look at in very global view of this thing. For this, maybe we see a war here or conflict here. I think that maybe 90% of the war and conflict started from the cultural conflict. Started from the people are afraid from losing their cultures, their identity. So I think the good thing I see in UK, let me take one example. It is the garden cities. The garden cities, it is a new urban planning started in UK at the late of 19th century, when there are a plan to work against poverty and so on, and to improve the people life. But at the same time, they put some community museum inside those, let me say, the villages, to keep those things, those traditions of the local peoples. Even they are, for example, using new streets, maybe new buildings, but how to keep those values, because the heritage is a value before we are maybe give another definition for this important word. I have a lot to talk, Mehiyar, but I know that limited.
Yeah, I'll ask you just a quick question about the project. And it's something I'm actually personally interested in, but I think others would be also interested in, is about the Ottoman history. And just in brief, in Najaf, and I would like to ask you why you chose this subject as a research grant. Yes.
In fact, now the grant is related to Kufa city, exactly, Mehiyar, not Najaf, because maybe Najaf attracted more interest than Kufa. Unfortunately, Kufa, maybe I can say that there are two periods of Kufa, two periods of striving of Kufa. The first period when the Imam Ali was the governor of the Islamic Empire and governing all this large area from this maybe small mosque. And as you know, all people know that Nahj al-Balagha, which a lot of statements and wisdoms are just in speech by Imam Ali, maybe 3 or 4 years in this small mosque. The second period is when the city, let me say, that migrate from around the Kufa mosque to a nearby river. It is about maybe 1 or 2 kilometers if you visit the city now. And there is an old city started and maybe new life and new heritage values and so on in the medieval ages, where the Iraq is a part of the Ottoman Empire. For this, for example, the trading, maybe old hammam or bathrooms and so on, and maybe handicrafts or boats like Canula in Venetia and so on. So a lot of things, but also the same thing I said again, that everything is threatened in Iraq. And this is the problem. And what about the local people? Why are they not care about these old values and these old buildings? For this, I also submit to get a grant, and I succeed to do that, to also, let me say, attract the interest of the government, for people, university, academics, to the city of Kufa, because always we are talking about the city of Najaf. My background now, it's part of the city of Najaf, and so on. No one knows about Kufa city. So, and this is another problem when Najaf attract the interest from this neighbor city, and which is in the past, it was the capital of the Islamic Empire.
Just on the note where Nahrein Network is also funding a project on the multi-period history of Najaf, on the Nahrein heritage, which is some part of it is the Christian kingdoms of Najaf. Thank you, Dr. Ali, Naji, Attiyah. I would like to move on to Dr. Mohammed Jasim. And Dr. Jasim was the former director of Mosul University Library, Central Library in Mosul, that was attacked, destroyed in the war against Daesh. And it's a difficult story. And it's something that we're very proud to support. We're so proud to support Dr. Mohammed Jasim Scholarship in the UK. Dr. Mohammed Jasim, you mentioned 3 important points: developing networks, exposure, and the third, in terms of your own intellectual and personal development, you mentioned activities and projects. If you can expand on some of those things, and I mean, you can also speak about, impart some of the experiences that you've, what you've been through, what you've been through over the past few years. I know it's been very difficult. I know you were there just recently in Iraq, but also during the period up to the occupation of Mosul by Daesh.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Maher, for having me today. Let me first of all thank the Nahrein Network, the BISI, and all people from the British Library for hosting me. Actually, it was really great project for me, and great or new experiences also as well, because as you all know what exactly happened to Mosul University in general, and particularly to Mosul University. That was really a big loss. The idea was, I mean, after the destruction, once we came back to Mosul after the liberation, we were thinking if we had digitized our materials, I mean, this kind of loss couldn't be like this. So from that point, I was thinking of how to develop the staff members of the library, and to develop myself. So this kind of a project was really awesome for me. I actually met Professor Rozhen when she visited. Actually, she was among the first people who visited Mosul after the liberation. So we were talking about this kind of scholarship. So from that point, I tried to develop that kind of project. And finally, unfortunately, I got this opportunity to visit the British Library, which is, as we believe, that one of the world leading cultural institutions. As librarians, we believe that British Library and the Library of Congress are really big schools for libraries. So actually, through this kind of a project, I try to deliver or explain the situation of Mosul University Library, though, I mean, at that time, there was kind of publicity for what exactly happened. But through, I mean, while I was there, I mean, people understand more about the situation. So the big objective of my research was to focus on digitizing the materials. But I mean, after that, there were other objectives, like to shadow more people to understand the work of British Library. I mean, I shadowed most of the people there, and I tried to have a look at the work of most of the units and departments at the British Library. And after that, I tried to deliver, or did deliver the speech about the situation in Mosul University in general, and the library in specific, for those who were like for librarians or for the people who were interested. And through that, I was able to get new contacts with them. So this is a very important point, is that now I am in touch with most of those people. As you know, Dr. Mehiyar, that we are in the process of developing our collections, and we are starting from scratch. So, I mean, at any stage, we need the support and help from those who are professionals. And I think that those people from British Library are really, I mean, nice and really exact people, because once I was there, I mean, I noted that everybody wanted to help, everybody was willing to support us because they understand the situation well. And I think that we are close to UK institutions more than other European or other people. So, I mean, through this experience, I learned a lot about the work of libraries, and also through this experience, we are trying to work together with those people in order to develop the collections. Hopefully, I mean, by the end of this year, and hopefully also within the next early next year, we can get the new building for Mosul University Library. And from that point, we can work on the plans and the project that we are thinking of right now. The good thing is everybody is committed to do something for Mosul University. Now Mosul University is open for the world, and I can, and probably you can see that from the workshops and the partnership. And one of my special objectives that to get kind of partnerships with UK institutions, and a good example of SAWAS and UCL library. They are really willing to help us and support us in any step. And also the British Library, I mean, from the head to other people, I mean, the staff, they are all really willing to help us. And sometimes they send me emails and telling me, oh, okay, you can get these materials, you can get this kind of support. So, I mean, it's really great opportunity, and it's great in all the details. So again, I mean, this question needs hours to be explained, but yeah, I try to be as brief as possible.
Dr. Mohammed, just in terms of, I mean, since we're all here, just in terms of the actual loss, just in summary, I mean, what was actually lost in Mosul University Library?
Whenever I talk about the loss, you are just like putting the hand on an open wound. So unfortunately, Mosul University lost a lot. I mean, we had about 1 million resources, 600,000 in Arabic and 4,000 in English. So we had like 10,000 manuscripts. We had about 15,000 governmental publications that goes back to the foundation of Iraqi government. We had reference books, about 20,000 reference books. We had about 2 million electronic materials. We had about 400,000 dissertations, soft copies of dissertations and theses. I mean, periodicals, about 30,000 periodicals with 3,000 titles. So unfortunately, I mean, the loss was really, I mean, big, unfortunately.
I understand on a more positive note that the library is being rebuilt through a German government grant. But I would also like to quickly ask you a question from the audience, if you can answer this very quickly. Is the future of libraries purely digital, and are physical books obsolete, rendered useless after the growth of digital books?
If I may, I mean, hear you well. You asked me about the digitalization.
Yeah, is the future of libraries in general. One of the questions here from our audience is about the future of libraries. And I mean, you work on this, the digitization of books and physical books. Is the future of a library, is it a physical, or is it a combination, or is it going to be completely digital?
Yeah, actually, digitization, is very important. We noticed that through the time of COVID. I'm talking about my experience as a researcher, so I relied completely on the digital materials, but still we are still in need for the hard copies. I cannot believe once I go to the library and cannot, smell the books. This is part of my life. So, digitization is important and it's easier way to get the resources, but still we are in need for hard copies because a lot of people cannot, rely on this kind of digitization. But again, we have to just like cope with both ways.
Yeah, thank you, Mohammed. And there is a podcast with Dr. Mohammed Jasim, along with our other panelists. I'd like to move on to Professor Maher Al-Helli from the University of Mustansiriyah in Baghdad. Professor Maher Al-Helli was based at the University of Sheffield. Professor Maher is a medieval historian. Professor Maher Al-Helli, you've been working for some time on sort of revising, strengthening Iraq's, curricula in relation to history. And I would like to ask you, what kind of developments have occurred, have progressed from the time that you undertook your scholarship in the UK until now, and what kind of support do you need going forward? Dr. Maher?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mehiyar. Can you speak Arabic the first, after that speak English to...
أقدر أترجم لك دكتور السؤال عن المنحة.
Yes, yeah, أنا أفتهم. Yes, understand.
جيد، أنا أترجم لك دكتور، أتكلم باللغة العربية، أنا أترجم لك. شكرا.
أوكي. لا دكتور مهيار، وبعد ذلك سأتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية فقط، إذا يعني فاتني شيء أنت تكمل. أوكي. طبعا في البداية أود أن أشكر شبكة النهرين، تحديدا الدكتور مهيار، الدكتورة إلينور روبسون، السيدة إيزابيل المنسقة في مؤسسة النهرين. طبعا كان موضوع هو تطوير مهارات التعليم الجامعي، وحقيقة اختارت جامعة شيفيلد اللي تعتبر من أفضل الجامعات البريطانية، أعتقد 5 جامعة بريطانية. وسبب اختياري لهذا الموضوع هو هنالك عيوب في بعض الجامعات، جامعاتنا العراقية، اللي هو التكنيكال أو الحداثة بالجامعات العراقية، والأسلوب والطريقة الحديثة في توصيل المادة العلمية إلى الطلبة. فلذلك يعني كان اختياري لهذا العنوان، وهو واحدة من أهداف مؤسسة النهرين، تطوير ملاكات الجامعات وتدريبهم. طبعا قضيت مثل ما شفت في الفيديو، قضيت الشهرين في جامعة شيفيلد مع الدكتور مارتيال. حصلت على خبرات مهمة أثناء تدريس الطلبة واستخدام الوسائل المساعدة وهي المهمة في التدريس، وكذلك نظام التعليم الجامعي بشكل عام. طبعا حضرت العديد من المحاضرات، سيمينارات، ألقيت محاضرة في قسم التاريخ عن العراق القديم والعصور الوسطى، وخاصة الحضارة العربية الإسلامية. كتبت مقالة باللغة العربية وانتشرت في وسائل التواصل الاجتماعي، وحاليا أضفت عدة مصادر إلى هذه المقالة وأصبحت بحث علمي. إن شاء الله قريبا ستكون في أحد المؤتمرات الغاية من عندها أخرتها بسبب أنه يكون أكثر انتشارا في عدد الحضور والباحثين والدارسين لمثل هذه المواضيع، اللي هو تطوير التعليم الجامعي. طبعا واجهتني بعد العودة إلى العراق العديد من الصعوبات أو المشاكل، اللي هي مثل ما تعرفون حضراتكم، يعني بعد عودتي مباشرة حثت اضطرابات في بغداد والتظاهرات، وكملتها هو جائحة كورونا اللي حقيقة وقفت شيء من هذا المشروع. لكن مع ذلك أنا أقمت العديد من السيمينارات والمحاضرات في جامعتي وخارج جامعتي أيضا، وحتى على مستوى المنتديات الثقافية اللي خارج المؤسسة الأكاديمية يعني خدمة المجتمع. وبالتأكيد أنه أفدت الجامعة والقسم. يعني the seminar, firstly I would like to thank Nahrein Network like Dr. Mehiyar, Dr. Eleanor Robson and Miss Isabel. My subject was developing university teaching skills for effective study of medieval history. I spent 2 months short time at Sheffield University where I met with the Professor Martial at the history department. I got many experiences from him through his assistance to me in teaching the material of the Middle Ages for the students' history department. We exchanged information about the ways and means of developing skills in university education. I attended a lot of lectures with Prof Martial. Also, I attended of seminars in Islamic history and medieval ages. I gave a lecture on the students' history department. I wrote an article with the Arabic language about new ways and means of developing skills in university education, all activities such as academic professors, students, and the university system. When I completed the scholarship in the UK, I faced some problems such as the events in Baghdad, the unrest, then the coronavirus pandemic, which stopped university education. However, I have given several lectures and seminars many times as realistic and remote. Thank you very much, Dr. Mehiyar.
Thank you, Professor Maher. And just on some of the points that were mentioned in Arabic that weren't mentioned in English, one of the key components of Dr. Maher's work was actually going back to Iraq to strengthen Iraq's existing, particularly at his university, University Al-Mustansiriyah, in terms of teaching methods and practices that he was exposed to at Sheffield University. Dr. Maher, if you can answer this question in English, because I believe your English is sufficient to answer this question. One of the questions that we have is written in Arabic, but I'll translate, is that the founding of the Iraqi state was closely intertwined with the British presence in the country. And so one of the questions here is, how will we write about the US experience, the US presence in Iraq since 2003? If you can offer any advice, any kind of pathways in terms of, in terms of documentation or historical analysis. We have lots of books about, the British in Iraq, and in 100, I mean, one of the question is actually in 100 years' time. But if you can answer that question, what will we really be writing about over the next, foreseeable future? Over the next 100 years about the American experience, will that be similar to the British experience? What kind of historical analysis will we have? And I'm sure you're very well positioned to answer that.
Can you again speak or Arabic?
دكتور، هي السؤال عن التجربة الأمريكية في العراق وطبيعة يعني توثيق هذه التجربة في البلد، وشنو نصائح يعني للمؤرخين عن توثيق هذه الفترة.
نعم دكتور مهيار، ما أعرف هذا السؤال، يعني فاجأت
هو
فيه.
السؤال نعم، هو إحدى الأسئلة من الحضور.
Yes, this is very surprise for me, but this not especially. I study medieval history.
دكتور ماهر العفو.
نعم.
أول السؤال شنو؟ شلون راح توثق الاحتلال الأمريكي؟ أنت مؤرخ حضرتك. مؤرخ. هذا دورك بتوثيق الأحداث.
نعم.
الغزو الأمريكي شلون يوثق مثل ما وثقوا الاحتلال البريطاني؟ نعم.
طبعا تحياتي للأستاذ جعفر، لكن يعني هو أعتقد هذا السؤال يعني شوية يدخل بموضوع السياسة أكثر من التاريخ، وخاصة هو يعني معاصر. فدائما يعني اللي نعرفه أنه كتابات التاريخية تكتب بعد فترة طويلة، يعني أو تظهر كتاباتها بعد فترة طويلة بعد أثر يعني الأحداث التاريخية تظهر للعلن. لكن عموما يعني هو سؤال بديهي، وكل يعني كل أحد أنه يقدر يجاوب عليه، أنه خلف الهيمنة الأمريكية أو السيطرة الأمريكية هو يعني لا يوجد هناك شيء يذكر حال بقية الدول اللي تم الهيمنة عليها عسكريا. فهذا هو ردي على السؤال. شكرا.
Thank you, Professor Maher. I would just like to summarize that because I think those points are very important. The question really is about how we, understand history, how we document history over time. What Professor Maher is saying is that given the recent experience in Iraq, US presence in the country, is that it's too fresh, it's too raw. And that's one of the difficulties of writing about recent history. Professor Maher said that we need time to reflect on what's happened to Iraq over the past few years. Dr. Maher, just one quick question. سؤال سريع. In terms of your position in the University of Mustansiriyah, what are the top three important points that need to be addressed in relation to history, in the teaching of history at your university? What are the things that need to be addressed in Mustansiriyah University as an academic? The things that you think are very important as a historian, and it would be interesting for our audience to hear that. The key challenges, the key ways in which you can, we as Iraqis and non-Iraqis can really appreciate Iraqi history and how we teach it. So my question is quite a big one actually, but if you can really summarize the things that really need to be strengthened, the things that we can all work on, because this is a really important part of our work.
نعم، بس العفو عربي ممكن بس عيده again.
الدكتور الشغلات الثلاثة يعني ثلاث شغلات تتكلم عن يعني التعليم، خلينا نقول التعليم في مجال التاريخ في جامعتك، في جامعة المستنصرية، وكيفية تطوير يعني خلينا نقول العادات أو وسائل التعليم، يعني أي شيء يعني يدل عن تطوير هذا قطاع التاريخ.
نعم، طبعا هو سبب انه اهتمامي بهذا الموضوع انه دائما احنا بالدراسات التاريخيه في قسمنا وفي كل جامعات تقريبا العربيه او العراقيه انه يكون الماده يعني شيء من الملل والروتين والطريقه التقليديه بعرض الماده. المشروع اللي يعني عملت عليه وجمعت معلومات انه استخدام التقنيه الحديثه بالتجديد الأثاث الجامعي في داخل الصف الدراسي، إضافة إلى أنه يعني التواصل الإلكتروني، وهذا يعني ذكرته قبل جائحة كورونا طبعا، أنه يكون أكثر تطور وأكثر حداثة من هذا التعليم التقليدي الروتيني اللي يكون على ملل على الطلبة. فواحدة من إيجابيات جائحة كورونا اللي هو فيروس كورونا أنه أصبح التعليم في يعني إجباري إلكتروني، وهذا طبعا ساعد أنه عرض المادة التاريخ بشكل رائع وجميل ومنسق وبشكل حقيقة يجذب ويكسر الملل بأنه عرض الصور مع الكتابة مع المادة مع الشرح، هذا طبعا رفع من مستوى التعليم الجامعي في جامعتنا المستنصرية اللي هو نسميه التعليم المدمج، رفعه إلى يعني فارق كبير، فجاب واسع بين ما كنا وما أصبحنا. فكان مشروعي أنه الآن طبق بشكل إجباري على جميع الأساتذة، لكن لازلنا نحتاج الكثير من التقنيات، لازلنا نحتاج الكثير من مؤسسات تعاونية بيننا وبين جامعتنا، مثلا سوفت وير أو غيرها من هذه المؤسسات التقنية اللي إنه تنجح العملية التعليمية في جامعتنا. نعم دكتور.
Shukran. I'll quickly translate that in summary. My question is really about teaching, improving teaching methods in the field of history at the University of Mustansiriyah. And this is a word that Iraqis use a lot, is routine. And they say it in Arabic, routine. And it's the same word in English. It's taken from the English, actually. And it's basically seen in a negative way. A routine is something that is actually, in a way, holds back the intellectual management, intellectual development, and also the management of universities. Professor Maher was also talking about the importance of modern teaching practices, which is what he picked up also from Sheffield University, overcoming those routine, the kind of work of making history more exciting for students, and that's the bulk of what Professor Maher was referring to, and also the need to develop partnerships with a whole host of supporting networks, organizations to improve teaching practices in Iraq. I believe that's, and of course, yeah, teaching methods and making history more relevant for students otherwise find history boring, and that's not specifically about Iraq, but I guess that's all over the world. Thank you to all our panelists. I think it's been superb. We'll move on to Professor Eleanor Robson, and we move on from the scholarships discussion, and we speak now about the future of the Nahrein network. As we all know, we've been funded to continue in many ways the work we've done for the next 10 years. And I'd like to ask Professor Eleanor Robson about the kind of experience that we've accumulated over time, and how that's fed into or feeds into our next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehiyar. The reason I wanted to talk about this in the same panel as discussing the visiting scholarships is I think there are a lot of similarities. You start small with one thing, you learn, you meet all sorts of people in new contexts, you have new ideas. I think Maher's concept of routine is really important, that you get stuck in thinking about doing ways just in one way. And so when we set up the project 4 years ago, I knew I wanted to change the way, at least in Britain, the history of Iraq is practiced. But I just, I had some vague ideas about what it would look like. I had no idea it was going to be as incredible as this, and that I would meet so many people who would just profoundly change the way I thought. So yeah, it's been taking the next 10 years, as you've seen from my presentation at the beginning, is taking what works. And that's been a lot of it, actually, after a lot of trial and error. And then being able to add to that, but also tackle the issues that we weren't visible 4 or 5 years ago when we were starting to work on this. But yeah, so for me, this has just been the most incredible intellectual journey. I mean, ironically, as you know, Mehiyar, and Anna can tell you very well, actually, I spend most of my time actually dealing with all of the boring administrative things Anna and I do, so that you folks don't have to. But I stand back and I look at all the work that's happened and all the lives that have been changed as a result of this. And yeah, I feel very energized for the next, what comes next, actually. Yeah.
There are, Elena, there are a couple of questions from the audience. I think you're best suited to answer them. One is about, I'll read it. The grants are generous, and I'm pleased to see Professor Eleanor Robson say you have additional new funding, but is there a plan to generate funds through a trust to keep the network perpetually going?
That's a really good question, actually, and it's a conversation I had with our donor. So the donor came to us. We didn't look for the donor. My original plan was that the network would end now when the funding ended, and then I would have a quiet time and I would go on research leave and I would write a book. Our donor appeared a year and a half ago, offering us a lot of money. And I had a lot of conversations with the donor about how it would work. So there were two models. So there's a fixed sum of money. One can invest it and then get a small amount of interest over a very long period of time, or you can spend it all. And, you know, Iraq's facing an emergency, a cultural heritage emergency, well, many emergencies. And it felt just, for the donor and for the team when we talked about it, it just felt wrong to save the money. We wanted to have maximum impact now. So that's one answer to the question. The financial question was, we can, you know, if we put the money we were given, if we put it in a trust and we'd taken the interest from it, we could pay half of Anna's salary, and that was it. No grants, no Mehiyar, no Zainab, no nothing, right? Well, I choose Anna because I work most closely with her, but you know, a small fraction of any of them, but no grants, right? And we couldn't give grants without the start. The other question that I had, the conversation I had with the donor, was whether to set up an independent charity like the British Institute for the Study of Iraq, an NGO. And again, the answer, I think, after a long conversation was quite clear, that being within one of the world's most powerful research universities is in fact a huge benefit for several reasons. First of all, it comes with all of the infrastructure of support. So you see the four of us who work in London, but behind us, there is the university department and our social media person and our department manager and our offices and all the IT infrastructure. There is all the research finance support, the legal team, everything that helps us get money to projects, ensure that we're complying with British law about transferring money overseas, etc., etc. So there's that practical implementation. But there's also, I think, the fact that UCL, it's a very unique university in Britain, in that, yes, it's a British university and a London university, but it also wants to make a difference in the world. And our very senior academics, the Vice Provost for Research in particular, just loves this project and loves what we were doing and gives us a huge amount of support. Now, some of you know I've worked in other universities. I've worked in Oxford and Cambridge, and I can tell you they never would have given the support that I've had at UCL for this. They're so proud of what you do. And really feel that it's important that universities are here to change the world in a positive way. So that's a long answer to say that this is why we're continuing doing what we're doing, spending a lot of money now because we need to, and staying within the context of UCL. Now that conversation might be different again in 10 years' time, when I will yeah, I will be thinking about retiring at that point. And Iraq, we hope, will look very different in a good way. So we can have another conversation as that time gets nearer, about what the next generation of researchers needs and wants in that context.
One of the questions, another question here is about collaboration, but I'd like to expand on it a bit. The question is, how do we develop collaboration between projects, as it seems like a logical step, and I think it's referring to projects that we're funding and supporting. But also I'd like to ask you about the importance of collaboration in a project, you know, in the Nahrein network. And of course, we heard it from our panelists today about the importance of that. But from your experience, you know, the idea, you know, the practice, not just the idea, but the practice of working with others in developing a network. And obviously we're working across borders. So, you know, it's Turkey and it's Lebanon and it's Iraq. There's a lot of collaboration, and how we manage that is really important. So yeah, so it's really, go ahead.
Absolutely. So now that, I think now is the time to start thinking about how we join the projects hub. So I spoke very briefly about the next set of grants. So, but there's going to be a whole set of grants, the bigger grants that if you've had money from us before, you can apply to those. And so that might be a good opportunity for projects that have had small amounts of money to get together and say, okay, now we want to expand this. Let's take Anbar and Diyala and Tikrit and look together at heritage post-conflict. Let's take it to the next stage. Or let's look at language in the Bedouin, the Marsh Arabs, and the returnees and Karma. How is language changing now? So there are lots of opportunities, and folks, it is up to you, right? I think it's really important that we are the center, but we're not, I certainly don't want to control you, right? I've said one of my sort of mottos all along has been, you know, it's British money, but it's your ideas, right? You come to us with great ideas and great people, and we will help you to make it happen.
We have a few minutes left, but I'd like to ask you one last question, Elena, about the difference between this project, which is the Global Challenges Research Fund, the Arts and Humanities Research Council funded program, which is coming to an end, and we're moving to our new funding. And what are the key differences between the last project, the one that we're in that's coming to an end, and the next 10 years, the program that we are developing?
That's a really good question. So yeah, and for the last 4 years and for the next 3 weeks, we're funded by the British government, essentially, at very, very arm's length. But there are certain expectations that we prioritise, you know, British interests. It's a sort of, and there are certain constraints on the sort of work we can do. Now, a lot of that seemed to be quite useful. But we can now open up in different ways. So there are some technical constraints we no longer have to comply with. But I think it's, so one of our obligations always was to ensure that our research has real world impact. Technically, we no longer have to obey the exact configuration of that, but it was still a very important idea for me ethically. So we're moving towards thinking about our real world impact in relation to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, such as, you know, the climate emergency, post-conflict, you know, fairer societies. So our aims are now linked to the Sustainable Development Goals rather than the British government expectations. And actually, the British government has stopped funding cultural heritage as part of this, their last cuts. So it's just as well we're leaving that, because we would have lost. Some of you know we lost funding at the last spring because the government stopped funding the work we do. And if we've already started spending our donors' money to keep this project going.
Yeah, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, where is the, well, I already co-PI, but I need the public knows. How do you choose the name Nahrein Network? I mean, it's a lovely name, a unique name, I mean.
Yeah, gosh. The real answer was slightly desperate thinking. When we had to put the very first funding application in, I wanted a name that was partly in Arabic, because it was really important that it was, the point was about local expertise and rethinking. Okay, let me take a step back. The way I was trained as a historian, or the mainstream in Britain and Europe and America is that there are experts in our countries and we study Iraq as outsiders, right? We are the experts. And I wanted to change that. And I wanted to say that Iraq, or Mesopotamia, which is what the word I grew up with, actually did not exist in antiquity. It's a Greek word. It's not an Arabic word. It's not even an English word. So I wanted an Arabic word in it. And of course, the two rivers, obviously, Tigris and Euphrates, but also for me, it was the idea of two things that were conceptually